What if Earth's biggest threat could save humanity? In this video, we're about to do something insane. We're going to melt Antarctica on purpose. And no, this isn't another climate change warning. This is about using Earth's largest ice cube to transform our planet's deadliest deserts into paradise. Sound crazy? Just wait until you see what happens next. Welcome to Antarctica, home to 90% of Earth's ice, and maybe, just maybe, the answer to our planet's water crisis. This frozen continent is like a giant bank vault, holding on to the world's largest reserve of fresh water. But unlike a bank, this vault has never been opened, never shared its wealth with the rest of the world. Imagine having an endless supply of water frozen at one end of the planet while the rest of Earth is literally dying of thirst. Right now, about 1/3 of Earth is turning into desert. Places that were once green and full of life are becoming dry, lifeless wastelands. Every year, desertification claims more territory than the size of Switzerland. Farmland is disappearing, communities are being forced to relocate, and wildlife is struggling to survive in these expanding dead zones. Meanwhile, Antarctica is just sitting there, hoarding 60% of Earth's fresh water in frozen form. This frozen continent contains enough water to fill Lake Superior 12,000 times over. Think about that for a second. All that life-giving water just locked away in a frozen form, while the rest of our planet struggles with drought and desertification. Maybe it's time for a redistribution of Earth's resources. Let's break down what actually happens when we let Antarctica melt. Imagine you've got an ice cube tray the size of a continent. That's basically what we're dealing with here. But this isn't your regular freezer ice we're talking about. The really mind-blowing part? There's actually a whole network of rivers and lakes already hidden under the ice. Scientists have found over 400 underground lakes in Antarctica, including one called Lake Vostok that's about the size of Lake Ontario. When the ice melts, all these hidden waterways would start connecting, creating new paths for the water to flow. But all this melting ice has got to go somewhere. And that's where things start getting really complicated. When ice on land melts, unlike ice that's already floating in the ocean, it adds to sea levels. And Antarctica has a lot of ice on land, enough to raise global sea levels by about 58 meters, 190 feet if it all melted. That's taller than a 15-story building. While all this ice is melting and reshaping our planet's surface, there's another story unfolding. One that affects millions of creatures who never asked to be part of this massive experiment. Impact on Antarctic wildlife. Antarctica's wildlife has spent millions of years getting really good at living in one of Earth's coldest places. Suddenly changing their home from a frozen wonderland to a watery world would be like completely rewriting their survival manual overnight. Let's start with birds that hold the title of largest population, the penguins. Antarctica is home to several penguin species, including emperors, adeles, and gentoos. These birds have evolved into some pretty incredible adaptations for life on ice. They need ice for breeding and raising their chicks. No ice means no safe place to have their babies. The numbers are unbelievable and alarming. Out of the 12 million penguins currently living in Antarctica, we could lose about 70% of them as their habitat disappears. Emperor penguins would be hit hardest. They might go completely extinct since they absolutely need sea ice to survive. Adelie penguins might fare a bit better since they can adapt to rocky coastlines, but they'd still lose most of their current colonies. But penguins aren't the only ones in trouble. Let's talk about seals, specifically the Weddell, crab-eater, leopard, and Ross seals. These guys use ice floes as resting spots, places to have their pups, and platforms for hunting. Without ice, they'd lose their nurseries and hunting grounds. Scientists estimate we could lose up to 80% of seal populations in Antarctica. Then there's the small stuff that most people don't think about, krill. These tiny shrimp-like creatures are the backbone of the Antarctic food chain. Everyone eats them. Krill feed on algae that grows under sea ice, and without it, their populations could crash by up to 90%. But it's not all doom and gloom. Some species might actually benefit from a warmer Antarctica. Certain types of fish, like the Antarctic silverfish, might adapt to the new conditions. Some seabirds, like skuas and petrels, might find new resting grounds on the newly exposed rocky coastlines. and new species might move in from warmer waters, completely changing Antarctica's ecosystem. Speaking of new species, the melting ice would expose a lot of land that's been covered for millions of years. This could create new habitats for plants and animals from nearby places like South America. But here's something really wild. There's life under the ice too. Scientists have found all sorts of tough little organisms living in underground lakes and rivers beneath Antarctica's ice sheets. When everything melts, these creatures would either have to adapt to totally new conditions or die out. Some of them have been isolated for millions of years, so we might lose species we haven't even discovered yet. But the animals of Antarctica aren't the only ones who need to worry. In fact, there's a good chance you might need to start looking out for yourself too. Remember all that water we just created? Well, it's got to go somewhere, and that somewhere might be right where you're standing. Global impact. Here's where things get really serious for us humans. Every person living below 58 meters, 190 feet, would need to pack their bags and head for higher ground. We're talking about more than 2 billion people. Imagine telling everyone in China and India they need to find a new place to call home. The map of Earth as we know it, it's about to get a serious makeover, but we might get to choose what kind. Miami, New Orleans, and most of Florida, without intervention, they'd be joining Atlantis underwater. And New York City's iconic skyline. Those famous skyscrapers could become the world's most expensive artificial reef, with their first 20 to 30 floors playing host to fish instead of finances. The entire Atlantic seaboard would transform into prime real estate for marine life rather than human life. But here's where this crazy idea takes an unexpected turn. Instead of accepting this watery fate, what if we could redirect Antarctica's meltwater before it reaches our shores? Think about it. We could capture this water and send it exactly where we need it most. We're looking at the largest water redistribution project in human history, and it could become our greatest reset button ever. All that melting ice, it could power a green revolution beyond our wildest dreams. With the right engineering, we could actually lower that terrifying 58-meter rise to something far more manageable. The Sahara, receiving our carefully controlled Antarctic water, could become Earth's newest agricultural heartland. And it gets better. If we handle this the right way, we might not have to deal with mass migration at all. The fresh water from Antarctica wouldn't just drown our old cities, it would bring life to our dead zones. But here's the moment that changes everything. One engineering miscalculation, one failed containment system in our global network of water channels, and those coastal cities we're trying to save, they'd be underwater faster than you can say climate change. We're talking about walls of water, powerful enough to reshape continents. Sure, the transition would be massive, but could this forced reset be our chance to rebuild smarter, to create a world that works for everyone? And how could we realistically pull it off? That's the trillion-dollar question. The science of transformation. Instead of letting this water raise our seas, imagine a network of advanced pipelines inspired by existing mega projects like the Nord Stream. These aren't your ordinary water pipes. We're talking about engineering marvels spanning continents. Just look at the Nord Stream pipeline, 1,224 kilometers of project connecting Russia to the EU. Now multiply that tenfold. We could create a global network of similar scale to redirect Antarctica's melting ice exactly where we need it. This isn't just about moving water. It's about transforming entire ecosystems. Take the Sahara Desert, for example. This vast expanse of sand could become Earth's newest carbon sink. How? Through massive reforestation efforts powered by Antarctica's water. Every tree planted would fight against climate change, pulling CO2 right out of the air. Scientists estimate that greening just 10% of the Sahara could absorb enough carbon dioxide to offset years of global emissions. Imagine turning Earth's largest desert into its largest garden and its most effective climate solution. Of course, transforming Earth's largest desert isn't just about moving water and planting trees. We need to think about the complex web of life that already calls these arid lands home, the wildlife revolution. What happens to all those perfectly adapted species when their sandy home turns green? This is where our plan gets even more interesting. Instead of displacing desert creatures, we'd create a mosaic of environments. There would be corridors of desert, preserved areas between new forest zones, creating the most diverse ecosystem Earth has seen since the last ice age. Camels would find themselves sharing space with new species, as areas of traditional desert blend into green zones. It's not about eliminating desert ecosystems, it's about creating a balance that works for everyone. Now, I know what you're thinking. All this sounds great in theory, but how could we actually pull off something this ambitious? Well, let's find out. Engineering the impossible. It all starts with building the infrastructure to capture and redirect the meltwater. Once that foundation is in place, we begin establishing initial green zones in strategic desert locations. As these initial zones prove successful, we'll slowly expand them while carefully monitoring their environmental impact. And here's the thing, this isn't just theoretical dreaming. We already have real-world examples of desert transformation projects working on smaller scales. Look at China's Great Green Wall, where they've transformed vast stretches of desert into livable land. Or consider Israel's desert agriculture programs, where they've made the desert bloom with advanced irrigation techniques. And when it comes to moving water on a massive scale, China's north-to-south water diversion project is already showing us what's possible. This engineering marvel costs $62 billion and moves 25 billion cubic meters of water every year. Sure, our Antarctic project would need to handle thousands of times more water, but that's exactly the kind of ambitious scaling up humanity needs right now. What we're proposing is simply scaling up what we already know works. As we establish new forest systems across former deserts, we're not just creating green spaces, we're building natural machines that actively combat climate change. The transformation wouldn't stop at ground level either. By introducing water to these arid regions, we'd trigger changes in local weather patterns. Areas that hadn't seen significant rainfall in centuries would gradually develop their own water cycles, and millions would see their living conditions improve as harsh environments become habitable, as dry earth becomes fertile ground for new communities to flourish. And there you have it, a plan so bold it could either save the planet or reshape it in ways we can't yet imagine. If this wild journey grabbed your attention, curious about the full scientific breakdown, tell us in the comments below. Smash that like button. Hit subscribe and that notification bell to join us on more earth-shattering adventures. Stay curious, explorers.